Williams with Gluten Free Cooking with Oonagh. I have a culinary arts degree and trained in London and Switzerland, but I live in New Hampshire now. My son was diagnosed gluten and lactose intolerant about 5 years ago, so with a culinary arts degree and a mother's guilt trip, I worked on doing all his favourite things into gluten-free, and of course baking is the thing we need to get good stuff. Now, I know in America it's very normal to have pizza on a Friday night with the kids and have Friday night movie night. And a girlfriend of mine with 2 younger daughters had nagged me all of one summer to come up with a gluten-free pizza. And I said, I am not turning my oven on in New Hampshire humidity and hiking up my AC to make gluten-free pizza for you. So she kept nagging, and finally I came up with the gluten-free pizza. And it must be good enough because her wheat-eating husband happily eats it and asks for more. And when I did a pizza and wine and cheese tasting one time, and we'd ordered in wheat pizza from outside and I'd made gluten-free pizza for those of us needing gluten-free, we were basically fighting off the wheat-eating people because they preferred my gluten-free pizza to their wheat pizza. So that says something for you. Plus I discovered I really don't like the basic tomato and cheese pizza. There's just something, even though I love tomatoes, there's something about it I really don't care for. So on my blog, royaltemptations.com/blog, you'll see my recipe for the pizza, but I put on top of it roasted Stonewall Kitchen's roasted garlic and onion jam and then some brie, and that's phenomenal. The one I'm making today, Bertucci's had given it for a chamber luncheon, and the girl next to me, I think it had garlic butter on it with ordinary cheese and then roasted butternut squash, roasted butternut squash is a staple in New England in the winter, and it smelt wonderful, so it made me want to make it again. I also, having made it into an ordinary pizza, which is a thin crust, I've managed to make it a thicker pizza like a focaccia bread. And what you can also do is scoop it with tiny cookie scoops into 1 and 2 tablespoon, literally blobs, and just leave it on the cookie sheet. And then it'll cook up into tiny, tiny pizza bites that you can put on whatever you like with it for a party. The only thing we discovered is you can't zap it in the microwave once it's cooked. It gets too soft and soggy. You have to put it back in the oven so the base stays crispy. Otherwise, when you pick it up from the microwave, it flops because it's soft, of course. But it's really good, and my husband totally enjoys it. So my gluten-free flour blend is potato starch, tapioca starch, millet and sorghum for better nutrition. I often use King Arthur Flours mix, which is the same as Annalise Roberts Authentic Foods, because it's a bit stronger, and it's also if I'm lazy and haven't mixed mine up. And making up your own is a lot cheaper. It comes out to just over $2 a pound. My potato and tapioca starch I buy in an Asian market where it's safe, but my millet and sorghum I buy through Bob's Red Mill, and it's gluten-free. It says it on the label, so you know you're safe with it. So what I've done, I have here the hot water with some sugar to help it feed, and then the dried yeast, just ordinary yeast. I buy my yeast by the pound at Costco. You can keep it in the fridge, or the freezer should I say, and just take it out as you need it straight from the freezer, and it works and it'll last for a year. So in here, I also add baking powder to my gluten-free yeast dough, because I figure if Fleischmann's yeast, the people that do yeast, if they can put baking powder into some ordinary recipes, why shouldn't I into my gluten-free yeast dough? So it has my gluten-free mix in here, baking powder, the bit of xanthan gum, salt, and then I put Parmesan cheese into it. I've also put goat's cheese in with this, and it's wonderful. I don't like putting in the herbs and garlic powder that a lot of people do. To me, it tastes too artificial when I come to eat it. And then I add preferably extra virgin olive oil for just that bit of extra flavor, because gluten-free flours don't have much flavor. So I add the extra virgin olive oil, or else just ordinary olive oil. And then I use some liquid egg substitute as the extra protein to bind it, or else 2 tablespoons of ordinary egg white. If you're going to buy liquid egg substitute, you have to check it's gluten-free and check that it doesn't have onion and garlic spices in it, because that tastes really weird if you make pancakes with an egg substitute that has onion and garlic powder in. Really disgusting. So you can see my yeast has got this lovely beery foam on the top. I'm going to pour it in, and then I'll be off air beating it up for you, because you don't need to listen to the noise, and then you can see what the texture is meant to be like once it's mixed. Now, of course, the other thing you have to bear in mind with doing gluten-free baking is you probably have to replace your handheld electric mixer, because the vents that are in it, your wheat flour would have got up to it in the past and will now fall back down on your food and contaminate you that way. if you've got fabulously seasoned pizza stones like I have, you really can't put your gluten-free pizza directly on that stone because it's so full of flour, it's going to contaminate you. A girlfriend of mine scrubbed it with Brillo pads. Somebody else said they put it through the self-cleaning oven cycle, which takes it back down to unseasoned. I just tend to line my pizza stone with paper, parchment paper, or else I also use Silpat on a Silpat liner and do it that way. And you can see this is not a dough. And it has thickened because of the baking powder and xanthan gum, but you can see this is definitely not a dough, and that's very normal for gluten-free pizza doughs. And if it was a dough, it would end up being too hard and dry once it's cooked. So I'm going to spread it out. This one I want to make thicker. My recipe will tell you on my blog that I literally tell you to get a ruler out and spread it out and measure it, because none of us are very good at eyeballing size. And if you make it too thin, it's going to be almost like a cracker. It'll be so thin crust. But I'm going to make this deliberately smaller because I want it thicker. So I'm going to put it into roughly, what's that? See, I'm going to be good. And I do love to measure to make sure. So that's just about an 8-inch circle. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to leave it to rise. And depending on how hot your house is how rapid it'll take to rise. It's going to be half an hour to an hour, depending. I know you'll see recipes telling you you can turn the oven on to 200, and once it gets to 200, turn it off and then put the pizza in there to rise. Trouble is with pizza dough or yeast dough, if you let it rise too fast, it's not too happy. So here it is. It's going to be left to rise, and then I'll be back with you. Okay? Okay, so here you can see the gluten-free pizza. If you look at the sides, you can see how much it has risen, so it's nice and puffy. I did make it smaller. So let's see how much smaller it did rise to. It's again just still roughly 8 inches high, or sorry, wide, but nice and puffy. I'm going to put it in a 425 oven for about 20 minutes. It all depends on your individual ovens. I have a very well insulated oven, so the heat stays in it like mad. I'm cooking it on a Silpat sheet, so the hot air is going to come up through the metal of the base. If you're cooking it on a stoneware, I like to put the stone in while the oven heats, so the stone gets really hot, and then I just pull this paper, the parchment paper, onto the stone, because then you get a nice thick I love the crispy crusty crust underneath. So as I say, this is going to go into a 425 oven for about 20 minutes. It'll come out, then we'll put the toppings on, because this tends, where it's more of a batter, it's much more difficult to the toppings are going to soak into it otherwise. And when it comes out, you'll see it'll look quite cracked on top. As I say, it's a batter, it's not a dough, so it's very different. So we'll be back soon. Okay, so here's the pizza out of the oven. You can see, as I say, it's cracked and it's reasonably thick. Now I'm going to drizzle onto it ordinary olive oil, and I just buy it by the gallon and then decant it into this as being easier to do. And I have some raw garlic that I'm going to spread onto it. And you could do it with roasted garlic if you don't like raw garlic, because it's only going to get about 5 minutes in the oven, just enough to melt the cheeses and warm up the other stuff we're putting on it. Oh, smells so good. Okay, then this is the pizza cheese blend, you know, the mozzarella and provolone and parmesan. Thick as thin as you like, it's totally up to you. And, you know, at least it's not going to be as bad as getting it in a store or a restaurant with all the extra fat they put on it. And at least it's safe for you this way. Tiny bit of blue cheese. We had it at a chamber meeting at the weekend, and it smelt phenomenal. So I looked up to see online what Bertucci's put in them. So I put only a tiny bit of blue cheese because I don't like a lot. This is roasted squash. Not squash, butternut squash, that I just cut up into chunks, as you can see, and just roasted in the oven with a bit of olive oil. Because I live with olive oil. I buy it by the gallon. It's wonderful stuff. And you can see it is fresh butternut squash. We can get it halved and peeled over here without seeds. And the Bertucci one said candied walnuts. So I actually went ahead and candied some walnuts. And of course candied them with maple syrup, because this is New England and we're used to maple syrup everywhere. We keep it by the quart in the freezer for ourselves. We don't do any of that fake stuff. And of course most of the fake pancake syrups are not gluten-free, and why would you want them anyway? We can get the real maple syrup. But I do know out of New England it's not as easy to get maple syrup. So I'm putting that on, blue cheese, ordinary cheese. If you don't want to candy the walnuts, I'd go with honey roasted nuts out there or no nuts at all. So I'm going to put this back in the oven just 5 minutes to get the cheese starting to melt and to heat everything up. And then we're going to enjoy it. So back in a minute. Well, you can see the pizza's out, and I really wish you had smell-o-vision. It tastes or smells phenomenal. I'm sure it's going to taste great. You can see the cheese is just nicely melted, and if I do that, you can hear it's nice and crusty on the outside. Don't you like that crusty sound as you do it? And this is very hot, believe me. I'm going to be very careful. Ha ha ha. And you can see it's quite thick there. I will risk taking a mouthful. I just don't know how hot it's going to be with the hot cheese to burn my mouth. But oh yes, definitely. What I absolutely love doing as well with pizzas, salads, soups, anything, particularly in the summer when I've got all my fresh herbs, is I like snipping the green onions or chives onto a salad, a pizza, a soup, because you get this phenomenal burst of herb flavour. And then in here, I've got some fresh parsley and fresh basil that I just put in there, just chopped. And I don't chop my herbs on a counter, on a board. I put them in a dry, washed but dry, not wet still, into a coffee cup, a mug, a jug, and just use scissors to cut them. It's a lot easier than trying to get a knife to be sharp enough. And you can get it, the more you chop it, the smaller it gets. But you can see this is absolutely delicious. I will have to fight my husband for it because it's got blue cheese on it, and he loves blue cheese more than even I do. So I hope you'll enjoy this. The recipe will be on my blog, Gluten Free. Oh, sorry, that's my Facebook page, Gluten Free Cooking with Oonagh on Facebook. My blog is royaltemptations.com/blog, and there's a recipe there as well, as I said, with Stonewall Kitchen roasted onion and garlic jam and brie. This is the Italian cheese, blue cheese, roasted butternut squash, candied walnuts, and some herbs on top of it. Please, if you enjoyed me, subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and watch out for more videos. Take care.